So Michelle trashes dudes while urging women to act more like them.
We're always hedging, because in the back of our minds, we weren't raised with the certainty of maleness that, kind of the confidence that young men in their 30s have, which they haven't earned. They just have it. We don't start feeling that and owning that until our 50s and 60s at a time when we start to be treated as invisible in society.
So true. And it reminds me of my new book, Women Are Invisible at Age 50, and I couldn't be happier. Divorce rumors continue to escalate for the Obamas. Hopefully they can settle it like men.
It looked planned from the start. The Obamas weren't just political figures. They became the stars of America's most polished and carefully managed public image machine. And now Greg Gutfeld is tearing that image apart piece by piece. Michelle's flawless reputation is suddenly being questioned, while Barack's famous calm and charm are facing a level of scrutiny people rarely see. From massive behind-the-scenes book deals to speeches that sounded more like Hollywood casting reels than presidential moments, this whole takedown is turning heads fast. What's coming out now has people stunned. You'll want to see this before the story disappears from the spotlight.
Michelle Obama surprised fans on our new podcast by saying her pet peeve about her husband is that he's chronically late. For example, we're still waiting on him to admit he's from Kenya. And as for Barack's pet peeve about Michelle, he's mad that she keeps leaving the toilet seat up. When she cleans it.
Barack Obama could turn the simplest backyard speech into something that sounded like a historic national address. Michelle somehow made a vegetable garden feel like a full political movement, where every tomato carried a message. Together, they became America's most polished and overly serious political duo. It played out like a romantic drama with endless speeches, big symbolism, and not nearly enough humor.
Michelle thinks American men suck.
Let me warn you, your rage does not exist in a vacuum. If we don't get this election right, your wife, your daughter, your mother, we as women will become collateral damage to your rage.
Julie, she says women are invisible. Which women are she talking about? Oh, I see her women in commercials, in TV shows. They're all over the place and they're all yelling at everybody, telling them, I'm a woman.
She's got some serious issues. She needs to go to therapy.
Yes.
And maybe stop doing radio just altogether, because we don't want to hear her speak. But she talks about, how young men were confident, which makes sense because she seemed like a pretty confident person growing up.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, you tell me. But I will say this, and I do believe she's actually biological female. She just plays the role of a man really well. But I would say that I think that it's this kind of stupidity, these types of conversations that actually make women feel inferior. Yeah. I felt confident my whole life. I don't need Michelle Obama to tell me that I'm not going to be confident until 50, which is 30 years from now.
Yes.
If you're enjoying this breakdown so far, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Now let's talk about Barack, the man who accepted the Nobel Peace Prize with a smile and then spent years overseeing one of the most aggressive drone strike campaigns of the modern era. The contradiction was impossible to ignore. For 8 years straight, he carried himself like a leader who never believed he got anything wrong, not once. Every appearance felt polished, confident, and carefully rehearsed, like a motivational speaker delivering a speech to an audience of one.
We have every right to demand that the men in our lives do better by us. We have to use our voices to make these choices clear to the men that we love. Our lives are worth more than their anger and disappointment.
What's that pitter-patter sound I'm hearing in the background? It's the footsteps of Barack running to vote for Trump.
Then came the presidential memoir, Part 1, because apparently the Obama legacy needed its own extended edition. Nearly 800 pages of carefully polished storytelling, all focused on explaining the decisions, the strategy, and of course, the brilliance behind it all, while steering clear of any major blame. The economy was falling apart, families were struggling, and uncertainty was everywhere. But somehow, every press conference sounded smooth, thoughtful, and perfectly delivered. Barack had a way of turning a massive economic crisis into something that felt like a high-level inspirational lecture. And by the end of it, many people acted like he had single-handedly rescued the entire country.
But no amount of waste is acceptable. Not when it's your money. You know the federal government pays for a website devoted to a folk music ensemble made up of forest rangers? They're called the Fiddlin' Foresters. I'll put their music on my iPod, but I'm not paying for their website.
You know, Kennedy, just watching that now, so that was 2011. Him and Trump are saying exactly the same thing, but he's not saying it as well. It's like he wasn't having fun with it.
Credit where it's due. The man could read a teleprompter like it was poetry written just for him. His speeches sounded huge and powerful, like an orchestra hitting every note at the same time. But the policies? They seemed to move a lot slower, like they were stuck in neutral. Change slowly turned into maybe next time. Yes, we can quietly became, well, Congress is complicated. And those big, hopeful promises about fixing everything for the future started to feel a little distant, while everyday people joked about things like rising costs, flood worries, and moving valuables a bit higher up in the house, just in case.
Obama doubled our debt. He doubled our national debt. He spent so much money and laid out this blueprint, and that was his legacy. And that is what Joe Biden was supposed to keep intact.
Don't mess with Joe.
Yeah,
don't mess.
Everybody knows Michelle. Let me be clear. Don't mess with Joe.
For a president who ran on transparency, critics argue the administration often clashed with FOIA requests while surveillance expanded and whistleblowers faced aggressive legal action. At the same time, the public messaging stayed polished and idealistic. Then came Michelle Obama, who launched a major public health push focused on reducing childhood obesity and improving school lunches. Supporters called it a meaningful reform effort, while critics saw it as overly strict. Later, her book tours and public appearances drew major attention and high demand, sparking debate over influence, branding, and pricing.
Michelle Obama isn't as strong a Democratic candidate against President Donald Trump as many Dems would have you believe. In a hypothetical matchup, my favorite kind, Trump wins with 47% of the vote compared to Michelle Obama's 44%. I guess some of the kids whose school lunches she ruined are finally old enough to vote.
Michelle often came across as a highly disciplined, almost school principal-like figure, always gently disappointed that America still hadn't quite done its homework. Together, their public appearances were carefully polished and tightly managed, like a perfect PR image rather than a spontaneous couple. At major events, they appeared composed and warm, but also distant, as if everything were part of a carefully designed brand. After the White House years, they moved into a new media phase through documentaries, books, speaking tours, and foundation work, where Barack reflects on big global issues in a calm, narrative style, while Michelle focuses on health, family, and structure. Over time, their post-presidency became a full ecosystem of influence and storytelling, keeping them firmly in the public spotlight through platforms, projects, and carefully crafted messaging.
Joey, it is kind of funny that they used to hate waste, but because they hate Trump more, they now love waste.
Yeah. I'm thinking the Fiddlin' Foresters was, I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I mean, compared to now.
I mean, over trans mice.
That's like wonderful. Now we have like trans porpoises in Uganda.
Don't be fooled by the carefully curated, relatable image. Michelle gardening in a designer jacket, Barack curating playlists and media projects with a relaxed, thoughtful tone. It all feels like polished authenticity, carefully produced rather than spontaneous. After leaving office, they've stayed highly visible through books, speeches, foundations, and media work, often speaking on big issues like inequality, leadership, and climate. Critics argue there's a contradiction between that messaging and the lifestyle that comes with global influence, private travel, and elite circles. Supporters see it as using their platform to stay engaged in public debate, while others view it as a brand that continues to shape political and cultural conversations long after their presidency ended.
But I will remind you, this was the same man who looked every American in the eye and said, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. If you like your insurance, you can keep your insurance. It was a complete and utter lie. So I don't necessarily trust that he really wanted to enact the things that he said he wanted to enact. And as Kennedy pointed out, that all the spending went up and through the roof. But this is exactly right. It's always about the messenger not the message with politics.
Now let's talk legacy, the real one. The Affordable Care Act, Barack Obama's signature domestic policy, expanded health coverage to millions, but also sparked ongoing debate over rising costs, deductibles, and a complicated rollout that included a widely criticized healthcare website launch. Foreign policy decisions during his administration, including in Libya and Syria, remain heavily debated, with supporters pointing to limited intervention options and critics arguing the outcomes contributed to long-term instability in the region. The Iran agreement is also still discussed as either a diplomatic success that limited development or a risky deal with uncertain long-term effects. On the domestic front, Michelle Obama's school nutrition initiative aimed to improve children's diets and address obesity, though it faced resistance from some schools and students, adjusting to stricter meal standards. Overall, their legacy remains deeply influential, but also widely debated across healthcare, foreign policy, and public health policy.
Less time with the family. I'm taking a second job. We have no voice at our schools. So this anger, Miss Obama, is not one-sided. It's just the men are the ones trying to solution, and their solution is to vote for President Trump. And here's the thing, their women are backing them up. So take that little message, curl it up in a little box, and give it to Mr. Garrison.
And yet, despite being two of the most admired figures in modern liberal politics, critics argue they've often deflected responsibility for the harder outcomes of their time in office, pointing instead to Congress, institutional limits, or the broader political climate. Supporters see this as a realistic acknowledgement of how government actually works, while critics view it as a lack of accountability. Over time, much of their messaging has focused on reflection, commentary, and storytelling about the system, rather than direct policy execution. Michelle Obama often speaks about the frustrations of political life, while continuing to engage in public advocacy and speeches, and Barack Obama frequently leans into a reflective, conversational style about leadership, culture, and history in his appearances and writing. Together, they remain influential public figures whose post-presidency voice is shaped as much by interpretation of their legacy as by their time in office.
Do you think Obama and Trump actually get along? I always think that, like, when I saw them speaking at the funeral, Obama was like, I think Obama appreciates Trump for saying what he wished he could say.
Well, not just that, and they also were both saying, hey, we both won twice. So that
Yeah. On Sunday, Val Jarrett went on CNN to defend her pal, President Obama. I wonder if the president prides himself on the fact that his administration hasn't had a scandal and that he hasn't done something to embarrass himself.
The president prides himself on the fact that his administration hasn't had a scandal and that he hasn't done anything to embarrass himself.
Now that's a low bar for achievement. He hasn't embarrassed himself. But it's true, no one on his staff was caught in bed with a giraffe yet.
They both carry a kind of victim image, even after leaving the White House with book deals, a production company, and speaking fees worth millions. Yet they still often present themselves as if they were wronged by history. Over time, they stopped feeling like normal political figures and started feeling like cultural icons, constantly wrapped in praise and symbolism. The media played a big role in that. Everything they did was amplified. Every speech was brilliant. Every outfit was iconic. Every moment felt historic, even when it was ordinary. But if you strip away all the hype, what's really left is more complicated. The Affordable Care Act had major challenges. Foreign policy decisions had mixed results. And much of the legacy rests more on image than clear outcomes. Now, Barack often appears as a calm elder statesman, speaking about democracy from a distance. Michelle returns occasionally with big media projects that still close to politics. Every appearance feels carefully produced, almost like a film scene. But behind all the style and presentation, critics argue there's a gap between the polished message and the actual results.